Saturday morning, the university announced it would be removing the name of President Woodrow Wilson from several buildings on campus, citing his racist rhetoric and actions, both as president of Princeton and the United States. Going forward, the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs will just be known as the Princeton School of Public International Affairs, and Wilson College will be renamed First College. Hours after the announcement was made, we sent a Zoom link to every member of the First College community. Here's what they had to say.
It could almost be perceived as performative PR still, but glad they did it. And I'm also really glad that First College was included and not just the School of Public Policy, because I think it's especially important that students feel like they have a place to live where they are welcome.
And I think that the leadership of First College is really good at listening to what students have to say. And like my experience has been that they're committed to making sure that First College is an inclusive space. And so I think that that's an example that the university can follow in making sure that wherever students make their home on campus, wherever they kind of find their place, that that's valued and recognized and amplified.
If the name is Woodrow Wilson College and like it's named after somebody who literally like didn't want others like on Princeton's campus, and like that doesn't really add up. And like the college that like I've grown to know, like in my time at Princeton, has been one like that has been really accepting, really inclusive, really homey, and really community focused. And like the name also like just really stuck out like a sore thumb because that was incredibly counterintuitive, counterproductive to everything that we have built and everything that kind of makes our college unique.
I'm also on the college council at the First Residential College. And I think our college council is glad that this is a decision that we came to. Can't obviously speak for everyone in that capacity, but for myself, I'm really glad that this is a first step, but I will be upset if it is the first step and there are not many other steps taken.
First College, very happy, a very welcome change, but also frustrating that it took so long, especially after everything the Black Justice League did. Even before our time at Princeton.
That's honestly typical Princeton fashion to be late to the party, with, admitting women, turning the eating clubs co-education, like that kind of a thing. Like Princeton has always been far behind our peers. Even as far as last week, we were the only Ivy that still was requiring the ACT, SAT, and we were the last one that, for this upcoming school year. Like that's just kind of like typical Princeton.
I think they're going to have a lot of public pressure if they hadn't changed the name. And now it's like all of these news stories are coming out praising the university for changing the name. But like what I said before, I think it's kind of convenient now that the world is really watching what's going on right now that they decided to do something.
In terms of like how Princeton and how the country is working, there's not like something new that's happening that has changed that makes this the time to change it. Like the same forces were operating in 2015 as well, so there's no excuse really for the university not having listened then. But I think that the trustees and President Eisgruber are choosing to make the change now shows that this is a moment that's unique in that institutions across the country and at Princeton are recognizing that now they have no choice. They can't equivocate anymore. They can't make compromises or build installations or try to mollify or qualify their elevation of Wilson.
BJL was notably student pressure, whereas now it's a mix of student and national. And optically, Princeton looked pretty bad.
And I think it has everything to do with the alumni base as well and the sources of revenue for the university. All of a sudden, it's become fashionable to become an aspiring anti-racist,
right?
As if it wasn't important before. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the alumni base is all of a sudden okay with the idea of intentionally being more anti-racist.
Woodrow Wilson School was formerly the only building on campus with a name, the only department or school, capitalized S, on campus with a namesake. And to remove that is to show that like it stands on its own and like it is, and it like also wasn't that hard.
The statement from President Eisgruber this morning was more forceful and powerful than I think his past statements have been, so that was encouraging. And I hope that he backs up the statements that he makes and that this is just one step in a larger series of actions that the university takes. I think it's important for the university to recognize the protesters, the BJL, and Black students who've been making these demands. And I think it's important that they kind of center that as part of the narrative of why Princeton is changing.
It's really interesting. In the email that Christopher Eisgruber sent out today, it was quoted on my recommendation, like the trustees decided to take off the name, and it's just kind of like, again, positioning themselves as like they are the ones pushing it forth when they, in 2015, threatened protesters. The school is able to use turnover and graduation as like a way to, alleviate pressure and to alleviate accountability. And so when students graduated from the BJL in 2015, 2016, when students graduated Princeton Title IX reform, like those activisms, were able to more or less be pacified, that sentiment.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a weird time to be graduating from Princeton. I think it's odd to navigate what our roles are as alums now. But I just hope that the university keeps listening to its own students going forward.
I guess as a student, I'm glad to see what they're doing now, but I hope that they recognize that this momentum can't just sort of fall. It has to keep going.
Like what they do next is going to be a real indicator on whether just the name change was something that was virtue signaling or if it was a sign of actual change to come.
In terms of, I think the demands that the policy school students have made, the undergrads, grad students, and the alumni are really powerful because it talks about kind of centering anti-racism as a mission of the school and thinking about how race and racism is central to how the country functions. So
the curriculum needs to change. I really think it's important for every student to take a class about race and racial justice and social issues within the U.S. and beyond. Because if they're not going to get that exposure here within a classroom, where else are they going to get it?
And, especially as somebody who wants to have as much, exposure to different ideas as possible as a public policy major, I want to be able to have experience to interact with faculty that reflect that, not only that diversity of thought, but that actual physical diversity.
And I think that we need to have a real conversation about reparations and legacy of the school. I think that that is something that's important. I think that that is something that should center the voices of the people who are most affected by it. I think that it is something that has been clearly described and clearly demanded by both the undergraduate and graduate populations.
I just want to say thank you to the students who came before me, who pressured the university to make these changes. Thank you to the students who are still on campus who are pushing for that, and hopefully that this is a moment of change that we can make last decades into the future.